Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
When you're in the thick of it, and I know some people watching and listening right now they feel hopeless.
It's kind of like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is like what we're experiencing right now, but we're afraid of what's underneath. We're afraid that, losing this job means we'll never be on our feet and all these particular things are going to happen.
Everyone, and welcome to the Christy Wright Show. I'm so excited because today we are talking about how we can have hope that things can change, even when it feels like that they can't. Then later on in the show, I get to sit down with the amazing Lecrae. He is a musician, he's an entrepreneur, he's an author, he is all the things, and he's got some amazing wisdom for us when it comes to restoration and bringing things back to how they should be. But first, let's talk about how to have hope that things can change at all. Well, I've got a silly example for you guys, but y'all, this is one of these examples in my life where I have seen God's hand in such a personal and specific way that you could not deny that God did it. All right, well, let me take you back to when I was about 23 years old. I moved to this little house that was backed up by the Harpeth River. So it was over in Bellevue, and it had a beautiful backyard that was fenced in. But then outside the fence, there was this steep hill down to the Harpeth River. Well, as soon as I moved to this house, and I was renting it with some girlfriends, I saw the fact that the river was basically in the backyard, and I was like, I've got to get a canoe. I've always loved canoeing. I canoed growing up. I canoed at camp, and I thought, this is going to be so fun. I would love to get an old used canoe to keep at my house so I can canoe the Harpeth right out my backyard. Well, I reached out to my mom because I knew that she had a friend that worked for this canoe company. So I said, hey, Mom, would you ask your friend at this canoe company if he has like an old beat up canoe that I could buy used for, pretty cheap? I didn't have any money at the time, but I was like, I have got to get a canoe. Well, just a few days later, Mom shows up at my house with a canoe. She said he couldn't use it. It was kind of beat up. He's just going to give it to you for free. I was like, great. Now, granted, it had no seats. It had holes in the bottom, but it was yellow and it was mine and it was free. So I was so excited to get to have my own canoe. And y'all, I put so much time and effort into it. I built seats inside of it. I put this silicone on the bottom to try to patch all the holes, and I got it in decent shape where I could actually take it down the Harpeth. And that whole summer, I got to enjoy it. I went up and down the Harpeth River. I got to take my dog Jackson with me, take my friends canoeing, and it was so much fun. Well, there was one particular day at the end of the summer, and I was coming up from a canoe trip down the Harpeth, and I just was exhausted. Like, this hill was so steep, you actually needed like a rope to kind of help you climb up. And so I thought, I'm not gonna pull the canoe all the way up the hill and into my backyard and inside the fence. Everyone knows that this is kind of an extension of my yard. I'm just gonna pull it up on the hillside, flip it over, and I'll get it tomorrow. It was getting dark and I was tired, and I was like, it was really hard to carry it up the hill by myself. So I was like, I'll just leave it here, flip it over, pull it up far enough. Well, the next morning, I go outside and my canoe is gone. And y'all, I know this sounds so silly now as a grown woman, but I was truly devastated. I cried and cried and cried because I'd prayed for a canoe and asked Mom for a canoe, and God brought me this canoe. And yes, it was yellow and beat up and had holes and had no seats, but it was mine. It was something God gave me. It was something I had so many amazing memories in, and I was so sad that it was gone. Well, fast forward. A year goes by, I grieve my canoe. I'm not even gonna buy another one because I feel so guilty that I was irresponsible and left it outside the fence. I don't deserve a canoe. I obviously can't handle the responsibility of a canoe. So I just let it go. Well, about a year and a half later, I ended up moving to another house. But this house was on 40 acres and I was living at a farm. That farm just so happened to be surrounded on all sides except one by the same Harpeth River. And I thought, okay, I have paid my penance. It's time for another canoe. I have got literally the Harpeth River in my whole backyard again. I want to go canoeing again. Let me ask Mom if I can get another canoe, but this time I'll really pay for it. I promise I'll pay for it. Please, let me just see if I can buy another canoe because I've got to take advantage of this awesome Harpeth River. Well, even though I was so sad my yellow canoe had been gone, and even though I prayed so hard that I would find it, someone would be a good Samaritan, bring it back, it never happened. And when I asked Mom if I could buy another canoe, she said, I'll reach out. I'll help you get another one. Well, a few days later, my mom pulls down the old gravel drive of my farmhouse, and I was so excited because she told me she was bringing over another canoe, one that they couldn't use. Apparently they had a surplus of beat up canoes they couldn't use. But y'all, when she turned the corner and went parallel to my house, what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Sticking out of the back of her old Suburban was the yellow canoe. And I knew it was the yellow canoe because it had the same sticker and it had the same holes that I'd patched and it was the same seats that I had built. Y'all, God brought me back my original yellow canoe a year and a half later. Tears start streaming down my face. My mom was like, what are you doing? She had no idea it was the same one. Neither did the people at the canoe company. Apparently what had happened was the canoe owner's wife was driving down the street one day, saw that canoe propped up on someone's front porch, someone that had stolen my yellow canoe. She recognized the sticker and the logo as theirs, went up and told them, this is our canoe, I'm taking it back. She took it back to their shop and they just left it there, knowing it was theirs, but never making the connection that that was the canoe I had. That was the canoe they'd given to me. And a year and a half later, when Mom reaches out and says, hey, do you have another canoe? My daughter, that's into canoe collecting. She needs another canoe. She's happy to pay for it. They said, oh, we got this old beat up one. It's got some pretty rough looking seats that someone built, but she can have this one. No one ever knew that that was the same canoe, but I did. And as I sat on my front porch, I was blown away at how personal our God is. How our God cares about everything, the big things and the small things and everything in between. I love the quote by Elizabeth Elliot where she says, if you believe in a God that controls the big things, you must believe in a God that controls the small things. It is we, of course, to whom things seem big or small. So I don't know what you're worried about today, and I don't know what you've lost or what has been broken or wounded from your past, but I want you to know that our God is a God that heals. Our God is a God that restores. Our God is a God that cares about the big things and the small things. And just one day can change everything. One day of my mom showing up at my house with my old yellow canoe that I thought was gone forever. I didn't have to have that canoe. I could have gotten any canoe, but what a God wink that he has me and he sees me and he can bring things back to me. I had an interesting experience earlier this year that was a lot more personal than a canoe situation because it was a relationship. I was down in Florida with my husband, Matt, and we were sitting there eating at this outside restaurant and having burgers with my son, Carter. We were on this trip with him, taking Carter down to the beach. And out of nowhere, I picked up my phone. I don't know if you guys have ever done this where you do something that's almost this out-of-body experience and you're like, I don't actually know what I'm doing right now. I picked up my phone and I texted an old friend named Takia. Takia had been my roommate in college in Florida. She was my roommate my freshman year, and she was one of my best friends for the 10 years after college. We were so close, and I loved Kia so much. And over the years, we just lost touch. We lost touch so much that it became kind of to the point where you feel like, well, now it's been too long in between us talking. It's too awkward. What would I say if I reached out? And I would overthink. I would think of her from time to time, but I would never reach out. And for some reason on this day when I was in Florida where I knew she lived, where we had been roommates and she stayed after I moved back to Tennessee, I picked up my phone and I didn't even think. I plugged in her name and I just sent a text, hey, is this still your number? And what happened next was text after text after text between us, tears streaming down both of our faces of just like, how have you been? Man, I missed you. I'm so sorry we lost touch. I don't know what was different about that day that I decided to text her. I don't know what was different about that day from any other day over the last 5-7 years that we haven't spoken at all. But that day changed everything. That friendship was restored. That relationship I felt like was lost or just kind of life got too busy for is back. And now we talk all the time. And my friend is back. So whether it's an important relationship in your life that maybe a bridge has been burned and you don't know how to reach out, maybe it's a conversation you want to have, maybe it's an apology you need to make, maybe it's a canoe you need to pray for, Maybe it's something silly or maybe it's something serious, but I just want you to know that our God is a God that restores. Our God cares about the big things and the small things and everything in between, and He can change anything. All right, y'all, I am sitting down with New York Times bestselling author and rapper and recording artist and businessman and all the things, Lecrae, and I'm so excited to get to talk to him. Lecrae, thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
I was just telling you off air, I'm a huge fan. My sister's a huge fan. And this is a lot of fun because I'm so excited to dive into the work specifically that you're doing this year with your album and then your new book, I Am Restored, because man, what a timely message for what the world is going through. So I just want to kind of back up and ask you, let's start with the album. Kind of tell me a little bit about the first idea and heart behind this message of restoration and where it came from for you.
Yeah, I mean, the album and the idea, the whole ecosystem of restoration came about because I saw how both myself and other people lacked a safe place to be honest about some of their fears, their shortcomings, the obstacles that life has hit them with, and not having a safe place to hear that though you've reached an impasse, a tough place, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. And I wanted people to know that. I experienced a ton of traumatic circumstances in my life over the course of my life, and then again over the last 4 years. And I've experienced some incredible restorative processes, and so I want other people to feel that as well.
I think one of the things that I've noticed when I'm going through hard times or have, traumatic instances from my past is when I'm in it, or even a difficult season, you're just going through a tough time. When you're in it, it feels like it will never end. It feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're like, it's going to be like this forever. It's so easy to feel hopeless. So how do you help people remember when they've found restoration before, or even have hope that they can find it again and reignite that hope? Because gosh, when you're in the thick of it, and I know some people watching and listening right now they feel hopeless. They feel like, is that even possible for me? Because man, it just feels like it's going to be like this forever.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say, you named it, is we kind of cascade into this dark place of just thinking about, if this happens and this and this and this is going to be terrible and this is going to last forever. And I think what we have to do sometimes is get to the root of that. Is what's the root issue? And it's kind of like an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is like what we're experiencing right now. But we're afraid of what's underneath. We're afraid that losing this job means that we'll never be on our feet, and we're going to lose our house, and all these particular things are going to happen. And so, really, what we have to get to is the root. Is the root of that is that I'm afraid that I'm gonna lose everything that I have, and then back that up with some reality. Is that really what's gonna happen? Is that really the real outcome? And create a plan, to push back on those negative thoughts. It's like, well, okay, if that did happen, what would you do? Mm-hmm. What would you do? And that sometimes allows us to think about moving forward and saying, hey, listen, if the worst case scenario happens, I'm moving back home with mom. And I know that's what I'm going to do. That's probably not going to happen, but you just push forward from there and don't let the negative thoughts just keep beating you up every day. It just gives you the inspiration to keep pushing forward. Yeah,
I love that. I love speaking on the power of your thoughts, because it's amazing how that can change everything. And I know for me and a lot of the women that I work with, when you can separate your situation from your identity, that's really powerful. Because, great example, losing a job this year. A lot of people have lost jobs this year, and they are feeling like, well, I lost my job, so I'm a failure. I lost my job, so I'm unemployable. And they draw statements about their identity and their sense of self from their situation or their season or the struggle that they're going through. So talk a little bit about that, and I know you talk about this in your book, but like separating yourself from that, where your identity is not from this traumatic incident or even something that happened to you, or even a failure that, a mistake you made. Talk a little bit about like the power of separating yourself from that situation.
Yeah, oftentimes I'll go to prisons or detention centers, and I'll pull out a $20 bill and I'll say, how much is this worth? And they'll say $20, and I'll crumble it up and I'll say, you're worth nothing. And then I'll throw it on the ground and I'll say, how much is it worth? And they'll say $20. And then I'll step on it and stomp all over it and scream at it. You're worth nothing and you have no value whatsoever. And then I'll say, now how much is it worth? And they say $20. I say, so you mean to tell me it's been stomped on, stepped on, told it's never going to amount to anything, it'll never be anything, and it never lost its worth? And how much more valuable are we than a $20 bill? Yeah. That no circumstance or no situation or nothing that's happened to us can take away our purpose, our worth, and our value. These are just circumstantial things, and circumstances change, but our value doesn't in the midst of it all.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It's such a powerful analogy and such a good reminder when it's hard to remember that, I think, a lot of times. I did some research, and I found an article that you did with Black Enterprise Magazine back in February when your album was coming out and the pandemic was hitting and a lot of things were happening, which is just, gosh, so timely for this message that you share. But you have a quote in this article, and I want to ask you about it. You say, I want to restore the view the Black community has of itself. Talk about that. And that was even, before a lot of the things this year happened. So kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think, historically, you can believe that, you can believe the historical narrative that's been told to you. You can believe that your history started with slavery and that all the things that you've seen over the course of time are how you're to be identified. And specifically in the Black community, we can tend to say, well, this is just our lot in life and we're frustrated with it, but what can we do? And I firmly believe that when you can see yourself outside of how maybe society sees you or maybe how you've been viewed historically, then you can dream, you can see something other than what you've been told again and again and again. And so oftentimes, which I've seen happen, in the Bay Area, I work with a group called Street Code, and all of Silicon Valley's up there, and you don't need a degree to work for some of these companies. You just need to know how to code. But where are you going to learn how to code? So what Street Code did is started taking people off the streets, taking people within the Black community, the Hispanic community, and teaching them how to code. And now they're getting jobs at all of these Silicon Valley companies, and it's changed their outlook on themselves because they've been told that all they'll ever be is a menial task worker, a menial worker, or something along those lines. And so if I can help people see themselves outside of what the cultural narrative, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah, that's so good. I love how you frame it too, because you frame that whole explanation in such a positive light. It's not like we're going to ignore this or pretend it didn't happen. We're not saying like, oh, well, that's not real. You're not completely diminishing it. You're just saying, I'm going to choose to dream instead. I love that. I love that framework. I'm curious, do you get pushback on that? Like when you teach on this, when you speak out in that, kind of in that direction, do you get pushback?
Well, yeah, of course, you get pushback on both sides. Of course, you'll get pushback on one side who, may be very cynical and very judgmental and only want to point out, look at all the negative things, look at the crime rate, look at this, look at all these particular things. It'll never change and you're just wasting your time. Or you get pushback from inside where you'll say, look what my dad came from or my mom came from. How could I ever be more than what I've seen? And I think oftentimes what I tell people is that I'm the only evidence I need to believe this works because I come from the same environment, the same background that you come from. I tell people about my 3 times great grandmother, Emmeline, who was brought here from Africa. She worked as a slave. My great great grandmother who worked as a sharecropper. My grandmother who left at 13 years old to find work because she couldn't afford to get an education. And to my mother who grew up in the civil rights era and had to, go to segregated schools. And so I've seen the detriment happen to them. And yet here I am rising above the ashes and still, making a difference and transitioning. So I know it's possible.
Yeah, that's so good. It's amazing how if you can spark, kind of like what you're talking about, if you can spark that hope and that dreaming in other people, it's amazing how they take different steps and different actions from that belief in themselves, like, oh, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. Oh, well, just because this is my past doesn't mean it has to be my future, my present, my identity. So I love that. You say in your book, you're never too messed up for a restoration. And I think a lot of people think that they are, even if, they want to hope like you do and they see, what you're doing and other people that are doing, but they feel like, Yeah, but that's not me. Like you don't know. You don't know Lecrae. You don't know how bad I've had it. You don't know how, and I'm not just talking about the Black community. I'm talking about anybody that's been through trauma that has done a number on them where they believe they're too far gone. So speak a little bit to that when you say, you're never too messed up for a restoration. And I know one other thing, I'll jump in on this question. I know your faith really influences how you lead people and love people and encourage them to dream. So speak a little bit to what that means to you, that you're never too messed up. Yeah,
well, that's exactly where I was going to go with that, is that, I'm a firm believer that, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And that's the desire that God has for us, is to live out that purpose. And so he loves to restore broken things and broken people and circumstances. Even when we don't believe that our circumstance can change, he's finding a way to change us in the midst of the circumstance. And so we come out on the other side better than we were. Now, you may still walk with a limp, but that limp is a reminder of what you've gone through. And so now you can look at it in a sense with fondness and say, man, I survived this, and look where I'm at today. Look what I'm able to do, because that's just something that God has done in my own life. I've seen him do it time and time and time again. He loves to restore. He loves to use crooked sticks to draw straight lines. And I love using characters from the Bible as well, because they're all so messed up. But for whatever reason, God still sees them as very usable. And so we're no different.
I love that. Just the devotional I was reading this morning, that today's entry was that verse. So I just love that you shared that. Wow. That's just perfect. It's amazing how these are things that I feel like we know, but we so quickly forget. We feel like we feel really strong one day, and then the next day we feel disqualified, counted out, whatever the thing is. And one of the things I'm curious about with you, Lecrae, because you have had your hands in a lot of different things. You have businesses, nonprofits. You're constantly kind of starting things up, and you've got your hands in a lot of different things. I'm curious how you have gotten into those things. How do you follow those passions, those dreams? How have you figured it out, with someone that I'm guessing, I don't know that you have a business background. How have you kind of gotten into that and made your way? Because a lot of women that listen to this show and come to the Business Boutique event, read the book, they feel like, well, I don't have a business background. I could never do this. I have this dream in my heart, but I don't know. I'm not a real business person. So speak a little bit to, even like we were talking about that identity of like, oh, I'm not a business person, how you've been able to go into these spaces and make a real difference in the business world. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
That's funny. It's funny because I was literally talking to my daughter about this exact same thing. And, she would say something along those lines, like, how do I start a business? And she did this incredible camp called Breaking Into Business, and it opened up her mind to so many different things. And she realized, oh, I've been doing it all along. I didn't even realize it. I've been walking dogs and babysitting and doing all these things. And I was like, that's the nucleus of it. It's just putting some structure around those particular things. And I honestly think that, if you're passionate about something, my mother used to always tell me that do what you love long enough, and eventually someone will pay you to do it. And I'm really a firm believer that if you're passionate about something, and if you see what you're doing as a part of the people business, right? Whatever industry you're in the people business. If you can take care of people, and if you can consider people, you'll be great at whatever it is you're trying to pursue, because ultimately you're here to serve people. And so if you're making a product, if it's beneficial to people, if you're considering people, someone's going to want it. Now, if you're just trying to get over and make a quick buck, that's a different story. I can't help you.
Right.
But if you really want to help people, and that's really how I got into it. I felt like there was a void in some particular areas, in music, or, in the wealth gap in disenfranchised communities. And I said, how can I fill this void and use the gifts that God has given me to fill this void? And that's where the business, began. And then people will come around you. You staff your weaknesses, and you find people who are better at things than you are, and they come around you, and then it begins. And that's how the process started for me.
I love it. I love what your daughter said. Oh, I've been doing it all along. I try to tell women all the time, like it feels big and overwhelming just because they've never done it. I'm like, oh no, you're already doing it. We're just going to do it a little bit more with a little bit more intentionality. So that's perfect. And I love how you focused on the people too. I have people that will, come through my event or a book signing line. They'll say, I want to do what you do. I want to speak on stages. And then I'm like, what do you want to say? Because I never wanted to be a speaker. I felt God say, hey, we have this message to share, and the stage is how we're going to do it. But I said, if you're just looking for the spotlight, you're going to miss it. So I love how you said that. If you're getting into business just to make $1, you're going to miss it because it's all about people. And you're such an example of that, Lecrae. I know people want to know, speaking of people, they want to know how they can find your book. And I want to mention the tagline because this is so good. I am restored, how I lost my religion but found my faith. Tell people where they can get a copy of this and find out all of the things that you're working on and doing.
Yeah, you can find the book. Definitely go to lecrae.com, lecrae.com/restored. But you can also find the book anywhere books are sold. So go to your local retailers, go online to anywhere you can purchase it and make sure you get it. I really want to walk people through chaos, and that's the goal of the book. Whatever kind of chaos you're facing, there's hope in the midst of the chaos, and I want people to find that hope.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. This spring, when the pandemic hit and all of the craziness was just starting, we did a series here on the show called Hope in the Chaos, literally. So you were just speaking our love language. This is just perfect and such an important message for this year when people do feel chaotic. So thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for this message. And thanks for being here today.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, y'all, I would love to share a verse with you from 1 Peter. And I've never read this verse before. I've read the ones before it, but this is interesting because it's exactly what we're talking about today. It says, "And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." And it goes on to say, "To him be the power forever and ever. Amen." I love this verse, not just because it talks about restoration specifically, but it talks about where that restoration comes from. You know, it's so easy to look at what's going on in front of us and what we're experiencing in our sadness or our brokenness or how we feel like we can't see a way out. And God is saying, I can restore you. I can make all things new. Our God is the ultimate healer. You know, if you look at the verses even before that verse, it says, "Humble yourself, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." It goes on to say, "Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that your brothers throughout the world are undergoing the same kind of sufferings." And then it says, "And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." I love this promise. I love this reminder that God can do anything. He knows everything and can do anything. I love this reminder. I love this promise because I don't know what you need right now. I don't know where you need something to be put back together, where you need a promise to be fulfilled, where you need a prayer to be answered, where maybe you have a burned bridge, a relationship you've given up on. You think, there's no hope for that person. Yeah, I'll pray for these things, but I can't pray for that situation or that person or that conflict. Maybe you need something to change in your job. Maybe you need something, a plan to be showed to you. Maybe you need a dream fulfilled. Maybe you need a path or a resource or someone or something to come through for you. I just want you to know that God can do it. If God said it, he will do it. He does not make promises, and he can restore you. And I believe it's those things where we have our deepest wounds, our deepest brokenness, that we want him to come to him with them. He wants us to trust him with those things and know that he can and will restore us. He will make us steadfast and strong. I've got some journal questions for you as you think about this and process it for yourself. The first question is simply, where do you need restoration? Where do you need healing? Where do you need God to come through for you and put something back together or heal something that's been broken or lost from your past? Where do you need God to restore something in your life? Write down your answer. All right, your second question is this. What have you given up on in your life? Is there a relationship? Is there a situation or a dream Is there something that you have stopped hoping for, maybe even stopped praying for because it just feels like it's too far gone? I want you to write down what those things are right now. As you bring them to the front of your mind, I want you to write them down in your journal as an opportunity to take them to God. Write down what things you might have given up on. All right, for your third question, I just want you to write down a prayer. Would you write down a prayer and ask God to restore you where you need it? Where it's something where you need healing right now, or maybe something you've given up on from your past. Maybe it's an area of your life that you've just lost hope. Would you write down a prayer of restoration, asking God to show you who He is and to come through for you in a way that only He can? Write down that prayer. All right, I'd love to pray for us as we wrap up. God, thank you that you are a God that comes through for us. Even when we give up on you or give up on other people or give up on situations or dreams or hopes, you never give up on us. You never tire of helping us and showing yourself to us. You never get annoyed with us. Your patience is unending with us. God, thank you that you love us. Thank you that you provide for us and you heal us and you can make all things new. You can restore our lives where we need it, and you can provide for us in the ways that we're asking. God, I pray for every person right now, especially those right now that their chest is tight, tears are welling up in their eyes. There's that person or that relationship or that situation that they have lost hope about, that it feels too painful to even think about, much less pray for. God, I pray for them right now. I pray that you show yourself to them in that situation, that you would wrap your arms around them, let them feel your love and your presence, and let them relax into your embrace, knowing that you can heal, you can restore, you are good, you are for them. You know everything, you can do anything, and we can trust you with our lives, even that thing. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all so much for joining me as always. And you can tune in next week for another new episode of The Christy Wright Show. And of course, for more encouragement on building confidence in yourself and the God that created you, you can visit ChristyWright.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh. The Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Rip. Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Rip live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.